Hi. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to write a for loop in Python. Okay, so we're going to learn how to write a for loop. So in the previous video, we learned how to write a while loop, and as I've already said in the previous video, for loop and while loop are pretty similar. You can do the same thing using for loop. What you can do in while loop. Okay. So but the structure is different, and it is about the personal preference that what one would be using, but the structure of writing code using while loop and for loop is slightly different. So let's get started. Okay, so first we'll define a list, and then we'll iterate through the list. Okay, as you know, the concept of looping in programming is to do the same thing, or to do one particular job over again and again. So we want to iterate through a list in order to do something for number of times, or we want to iterate in order to do the same job again and again. All right, so let's define a list, and let's call this list as list equal to and then we'll keep a number of we'll keep a list of numbers in this case. Okay, let's say the numbers are 10, then 100. You can put any number. Okay, so these are just powers of 10. Okay, and then we'll write the for loop. Okay, so the syntax is like this: for, and then we since we want to iterate through this list, so we define a variable x. Okay, for x in list. All right, so what it does is it defines a variable x, and it assigns values from this list. Okay, and we can iterate it. Okay, so we'll print x in this. All right, so as you can see, the syntax is like for x in list. So the variable x is going to iterate through the all the values of in the list in the list. Okay, so you can give another name. Actually, it's slightly trouble when you actually talk about it. So you can give it a y, let's say. Okay, so list y. Okay, so for x in list y, it's going to print x. Okay, so first x will be assigned to 10, and then it's going to print 10, and then x will be assigned to 100, it's going to print 100, and so on. Okay, so we are missing a comma here. All right, so in the previous video we saw while using while loop, we used to define the entry criteria and the exit criteria, or the terminating criteria, right? So in this case, since we have already defined the list, we need not have to explicitly define the entry and the terminating criteria, right? Because the list, or the types of output that we want from this loop is already there in place. All right, another important thing to note here is the indentation. Okay, so when you define the for loop, you always have this indentation in place, right? Sometimes you will have this problem, like if you write print in here, it's not going to work, because it's going to throw an indentation error. Okay, so make sure you have this. So it's automatic, but if it is not, if you're copying code from elsewhere and printing it here, make sure that it's properly indented. Okay, all right, so let's run this. Let's save this with Control S, and then we can run this code by pressing F5. All right, so when we press F5, you can see that the numbers, or the elements in the list y is all printed, like 10, 100, and so on. Okay, so that's how we can do it. And as you know, that we can do the same thing, or you can print the same numbers using a while loop also. So it comes down to the personal preference. All right, so what if we write something, or we want to write something outside this loop? Okay, can we do that? How can we do that? Let's include another print statement, and let's say we want to write we have printed all the numbers in the loop. Okay, so we want to print this particular statement at the end, so we don't want to print every time the loop runs. We only want to print it once after the loop is totally run, like all the iterations in the for loop is over, right? So let's save this and run F5, and you can see first the loop prints all the numbers in the list or all the elements in the list Y, and then finally it it runs the print statement which prints the statement we have printed all the numbers in the loop or in the list. Okay, all right. So what if we want to print the statement every time in the every iteration, I would say. Okay, so what you need to do is that we need to ensure that this is inside this loop. So in order to bring it inside the loop, we just have to use the indentation. Okay, so now it is going to print every time there is an iteration. Okay, so instead of printing it once after the loop gets over, it is going to print 5 times because there are 5 elements in the list. Okay, let's save this and we'll run. All right, now you can see in the first iteration the value of x is 10, so it prints 10, and then it also print the statement we have printed all the numbers in the list. Okay, so that's how you can print several statements or several numbers, several calculations. You can do also calculations and print, right? Let's say we want the square of every number in the list. We can also do that. Okay, we just save. So this is for square. Okay, so for squaring something or taking the power of something, we just have to use 2 asterisks. Okay, all right. So you can see every time we have the iteration, it's going to do the calculation first and then print it. Okay, x square, so which is 10 square is 100, and then 100 square is 10,000, and so on. All right, so that's about how to write a for loop in Python. Okay, so you can also write for loop in another way. Okay, so let's remove this first. Okay, so we can write in this fashion also. Let x in range 1 to, let's say, 20 print x cube. All right, so what we're doing here is we're using the same for loop that we have demonstrated in the previous section prior to this. In this case, we are using the range function in order to write a for loop. Okay, so instead of defining a list explicitly and then calling or using a variable to iterate through the list, we are just creating the list inside the or within the for loop. Okay, so for x in range 1 to 20, so x is going to iterate through the range 1 to 20, and the range 1 to 20 will have 20 iterations in this case, because it's always incremented through by 1, so it's incremented by 1. Okay, so we'll save this and let's run by pressing F5. Now you can see when we press F5, you have first number in the list, which is 1, and then it's square, it's cube we are printing. So the cube of 1 is 1, and then we are printing 1, right? In the second iteration, the number here is, or x takes the value of 2, because the increment is 2 in this case. If you go back, So range creates a series of numbers or list of numbers incremented by 1. Okay, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 20. So that's what it creates. So x takes value of 1 and then 2 and so on, right? So, and we are printing, remember we are printing the cube of x, right? So the cube of 1 is 1, the cube of 2 is 8, the cube of 3 is 27 and so on, right? So that's about how we can write a um, for loop in Python. In the next video, we'll see how to write conditional statement like if, else if, and else statement, and we'll also see how we can combine the for loop with if and else statement and write beautiful codes. So thank you, and please subscribe to the channel for more videos. Thank you.